There's the hook that always goes back on, facing towards the gears over here. So I'm going to pull that off and it goes into a parts cup. We'll clean that up later. That's not in bad shape. So if you do not feel ambitious, this is as far as you need to go with that. You could go ahead and clean your spring barrels out and put it back together. But I'm going to completely disassemble this. So next thing that I'm going to do is pull this speed indicator off. It's held on simply by 2 screws. Here's one right here, and the other one is accessible through this hole on the top. There's that one. Screws that hold it. Stick them in the parts cup. I'll put this in the parts cup with the needle indicator. There is a very small clock spring on this that you do not want to damage in any way. This again is very important to have this clean because this operates off of your governor. As the governor expands and contracts, it pushes this little pad back and forth. The linkage takes it all the way up to your needle indicator, so as that pad moves it turns your needle indicator back and forth. Sometimes I've seen these frozen solid. They sat in one position for so long that it actually, this won't turn at all, and it actually acts as a speed regulator for your governor. So you want this to be moving freely. This one's doing pretty well. Of course, I sprayed the whole motor down with WD-40 a few days back just to make sure that everything is free and ready to come apart. I'll go ahead and drop this in the parts cup with the rest of the speed indicator pieces. We'll set that aside for now. Next thing to remove is the governor. The governor is held in by 2 screws and it has 2 keepers. You can see one of the keepers pointing through over here. Here's one of the screws on this side. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that all the way up, and I've got another parts cup specifically for the governor. The keepers on the governor on this side has a little notch that corresponds with the screw. That puts the governor in the correct position for the motor. I can go ahead and remove this all the way out now. Just put it in the parts cup for cleaning. And these little keepers need to come all the way out. And we want to be very careful. As you can see, this side does not have a groove. I'll go ahead and pull this one out to compare. As you can see, there's a little groove in this one, and that groove sets the governor at the correct position on the motor. Also inside of here there are 2 ball bearings that you want to be sure not to lose. The ball bearings glide on the pin of the governor. You want those in place when you put it back together. So I'm also going to put those in a parts cup. I'm going to actually use this parts cup for cleaning when I clean those parts. Sometimes the ball bearings come out of there and sometimes they don't, but just in case you want to be sure and have it contained inside of here because they are little tiny balls and very easy to lose. So we'll go ahead and put all these parts here aside for cleaning. Next thing I'll do is remove the speed regulator arm. It's held in just by 2 screws that are right here. These screws sometimes seize into place, so you want to be very careful not to, if they're in there too tight, you want to be very careful not to break them. I've had them break in half, which leaves you no place for a slot to go, and it makes it almost impossible to get out. If they are in there tight, you can take a needle nose plier and loosen them up. These aren't too bad, so with that loose, I'm going to go ahead and just remove these. There's that part. This is spring loaded on this arm right here. You can just barely see the spring from there. So with this loose, there we go. And with that removed, I should be able to pull this out. The spring goes in pretty easily just from resting under that little ledge right there. You'll see how it goes back in when we put it back together. This whole thing comes out of here. Here is the friction pad. This is made out of leather. Should be doused in oil, but it should also be in good condition. I've seen these worn down to half of that size. This one is in good shape, so we can reuse that. A lot of parts that you'll be needing, if you should happen to need a part that's wore out on your motor, is readily available on the internet, which is one good thing about this style of motor. The next thing I'll want to do is remove the spindle. The spindle is held into place by a little screw, and sometimes the spindle needs to be cleaned before you can remove it, because this collar needs to slide up this worm drive of the spindle. We'll see how this one does. This is the last piece that I'll need to remove from the body of the motor. And I'll start a new parts cut for this. Okay, before I remove this, there's a ball bearing located in the pocket up here at the end of the shaft. We want to make sure that we don't lose. It's about the size of a BB, so it's a little bit larger than the other ones. And this should slide up, and it is, so that's good. We do not want to damage any of the gears on this. This also will affect playback of your motor. And if you're not careful, you can slide it all the way up to the top here and scrape those gears along this little bracket right here. So you want to be sure and hold this right in the center as you pull this up. And that pulled out real nice. Put that in the parts cup. This base plate is now ready for its cleaning. To clean parts, I use a metal pan. This is like a fruit cake pan from back in the day. I'll fill it full of about 2 inches of kerosene, and as you can see, the whole motor fits down in there nicely. I've got a toothbrush that I'll clean all my parts with. And you'll want to make sure that you'll go through everything with teeth, any kind of gearing that you have, and get all that old varnish and gunk off. That goes for the spindle and also the gear that's attached to the spindle. You want to go all the way around and get all those teeth cleaned up, especially on the drive gear. And it'll be time to remove the springs from the barrel. To take these gears out, there's the winding gear on this side. It simply pulls straight up, just like that. The drive gear does the same thing. It pulls straight off. And here you can see the half shafts that I was talking about earlier, set down in there just like that. We'll set these aside for cleaning. And we'll take a small screwdriver, and there's a retaining clip all the way around here. What we need to do is find the the beginning of that retaining clip, which just happens to be right here. Sometimes it's covered in grease and you need to scrape the grease off to find out where that clip meets. This one's right here, so I'm just going to simply put my screwdriver down in here and pry it up. I'm going to hold my hand over the top so it doesn't go flying. And there's the clip. Sometimes you can put a screwdriver into this hole and pry up and get this to come off. Other times it doesn't come off that easily. If it comes off hard, it usually goes back in there a little bit hard. And there's the lid. We'll set that aside for cleaning. And we've exposed our spring, which doesn't look like a very greasy mess, which is surprising to me. But what grease is there, I assure you, is sticky, which is causing the thumping noises. Okay, we're ready to pull the spring out of the barrel now. Before we get started, I will suggest that you wear a long sleeve shirt or jacket. I've got a heavy coat that I wear for this, just for safety reasons. I've also got some thin cotton gloves that I use for all of my rebuilds. I go through about 3 pairs of these during a rebuild. I've also got safety glasses on my eyes. If you're doing this for the first time, the way that I learned to do it was to get an old pillowcase, and I simply open the pillowcase up and set the spring barrel down inside so that when I pull the spring out, it will at least be contained. This doesn't help you during the process of putting the spring back in, but if you're uncertain about what you're doing, this certainly helps. And I'm not going to use this. I've done so many of them that, and also I want you to see what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do, whether you've got it in the pillowcase or not, stick your finger down the middle and simply pull up on the spring. You're going to get to a point where the spring will be over the lip, which it is right here, as you can see. And I can simply, by holding the spring barrel, get my glove back out of there, I'm going to hold the spring barrel right here and I'm just going to glide that out. At some points it seems like it gets a little bit out of control, but as long as you grab a hold of the spring barrel and hold it firmly, you don't ever want to take both hands off. And as you can see, I'm just kind of gliding this out as it goes along. So here we go. I've got my hands wrapped around the barrel. I'm holding the barrel firmly and I'm using my thumb and index fingers to kind of glide this out. And again, it's going to seem to get out of control, but if you just keep a hold of it, it's going to take it all the way to the end. This, as I said, was an older version of this style of motor. This one was built in 1918, which was the first year, so this is the first version of this motor. It's going to have pear-shaped hole springs. Later, Victor started using a bent arbor spring, which are a little bit easier to put in place. The top spring is easier to get out than the bottom spring. Here again, I've got my fingers wrapped all the way around. I feel totally safe doing this. As long as you don't let yourself get interrupted and pull a hand off, you'll be okay. Set that aside and see where I'm at. I've got about 2 more laps here. Nope, I'm to the end. So I'm all the way to the end. Here is a pear-shaped hole down in here. And I'm simply going to release that hole off of the rivet, just like that. And there is the hole. That simply goes over a rivet. The rivet has a little lip on it, so that holds quite well. And I'll set this spring aside.